Welcome to today's news on TV9. I'm Ada Cho. In today's local news, some immigration staffs are now being investigated for breaking the rules, while the NET Hui 3-day conference discusses the technical issues and improvements for New Zealand's internet. And as for the Sir Peter Blake Trust Emerging Leaders Award, our TV9 reporter talks to one of the recipients. A breach of policy has been reported. Some of the New Zealand immigration staffs are now being investigated. Amy Chin reports.
Staff at Immigration New Zealand are accused of using a confidential client database, looking at information on wealthy applicants and joking about who is dateable. Due to complaints of accessing client records without authorization, reports show that 7 cases involving 9 staff were found substantiated. 3 are under investigation. Head of New Zealand Immigration Steve Stewart spoke to 9 News on his take on the breach.
And, we're very disappointed, and in fact, the vast majority of our staff are disappointed that these few people are letting everyone down.
With a large organisation such as Immigration New Zealand, who has approximately 2,270 employees using their AMS database system, there is the risk of mishaps along the way. DG lawyer Sonny Lam takes a lighter note on the situation.
It's something that perhaps is not best practice, but realistically you're going to get some breaches of confidential information between staff members whenever those staff members have access to information which normal people would not.
Regardless of what they do or do not do with client information, it is still regarded by Stewart as non-tolerable.
Make it very clear our expectations around what's appropriate use of our AMS system and what's inappropriate. We have a very strong culture around our code of conduct, and our managers now are becoming much more vigilant in this area and are actually, where they see instances of inappropriate behaviour, they are reporting it.
It is clear that Immigration New Zealand will step up its staff regulations to reduce the chances of future occurrences. Amy Chen, 9 News.
A 3-day conference is being held in Auckland to discuss the social and economic impact of the internet. The NET Hui conference is in its 2nd year, gathering around 600 participants, each with a stake in the internet's future. Organisers say they're hoping to get some positive action in raising awareness. Christy Jha reports.
The NET Hui conference is a 3-day event gathering people from all walks of life, all with an interest in the internet. Keynote speakers include Minister for Economic Development Stephen Joyce, Labour leader David Shearer, and Deputy Mayor of Auckland Penny Halls. They, along with 600-odd participants, are discussing the net's social and economic impact on modern life. Conference organizer Vikram Kumar says the internet has become so ubiquitous that people's lives are changed forever.
On the upside, there's been a huge amount of communications that people are able to do quickly and cheaply. We've now got to a point that anyone can say anything to everyone in the world at pretty much almost zero cost. And that's changing us as society, because we're very used to having a hierarchical society where you have a top-down flow, and the internet disrupts that.
Kumar talks about the concept of disruptive innovation, and he compares the rising power of the internet to the invention of the printing press.
Before the printing press was invented, the church had a very strong hold because it was the only one that knew the truth in terms of the Bible. When the printing press came, it allowed everyone to get access to a Bible. But that was just the beginning point. After that, we could print anything.
Kumar says what may start off as a small invention can have massive social and economic impact in the future, and he sees the internet as doing just that to people's lives. The NET Hui conference will present findings of 2 study papers conducted by Infometrics and NZIER before wrapping up on Friday. Christy Zhao, 9 News.
Latest business report findings show over half of New Zealand firms are slightly optimistic about the economy over the next 12 months. They think the worst effects from the global financial crisis and European debt saga are behind them. The economists say what happens in China can still have a great impact on us. Christy Zhao has more.
The latest Grant Thornton International Business Report interviewed 3,000 high-level executives across 40 economies in May and June, and the results show over half of New Zealand respondents were slightly optimistic about next year's economic outlook. But reality is not painting quite the rosy picture, with annual gross domestic product growing at a lackluster 2%. Economists say recovery remains very modest.
What we are seeing is the housing market gradually strengthening, particularly in Canterbury, construction activity and other activity related to the rebuild picking up quite strongly, and also that retail spending is gradually continuing to grow. So it's not a spectacular recovery story here, just that gradual recovery continuing.
The Grant Thornton survey found that Kiwi businesses think the worst may be behind them, with acute fears over Europe's debt crisis subsiding a little. But confidence in Europe is yet to fully recover, and there are concerns that China's growth bubble is closer to bursting.
What's happening in China is of great focus. There certainly have been those signs in the first half of the year that the Chinese economy has slowed a little bit more sharply than what people have anticipated. And our view is that by the end of this year we are likely to see signs that the Chinese economy is starting to accelerate again, which would be encouraging for New Zealand.
Nick Tuffley says China and how well it copes with the European slowdown is more important than the direct effects on our exports to Europe. But he expects the Chinese government to have the ability to boost its economy through spending and credit easing. China's official target for trade increase is at 10% this year. Christy Zhao, 9 News.
Sir Peter Blake Trust Emerging Leaders Award is a prestigious award for people who are equipped with the right values and attitudes to act upon and realize their dreams. Our reporter has interviewed one of the recipients of the award this year. Chiu Jing Wong, CEO of Borderless Production, shares her inspirations.
The beautiful thing about the Sir Peter Blake Trust and the recognition of leadership under that banner is that they are very quick to say a leader's job is to serve. And I really like that about the trust, because it's leaders are not what should not be people that we necessarily put on pedestals and say that are all important in society. A leader is somebody who has the skills and the ability and has a following and the ability to basically create a movement and that people choose to follow.
Borderless Production was funded 6 years ago by Chiu Jing Wong and Dean Easterbrook. They strive to create goodness in everything they do and know that it takes courage to step up and take action when it comes to making a positive change.
The whole vision around Borderless is to use film and creative campaigns to effect positive change in the world. So the idea is we work on social issues, and we've selected a number over the years that we've focused on and we've made films about, and then developed creative advertising and marketing campaigns. And the outcomes are really that we want to change the lives and improve the lives of the people for whom the campaign is about. An example would be that in 2006, my husband and I decided to create a campaign called A Grandmother's Tribe. And that was a documentary film which was about grandmothers in sub-Saharan Africa who were raising their orphan grandchildren who were losing their parents because of HIV and AIDS. So there's about 14 to 18 million grandchildren in sub-Saharan Africa who were in this situation. So we made the film, we showcased it around the world in different centres, and then we led the campaign, which was all about raising awareness and money to support the grandmothers. And that's gone really well.
Social campaigner is the label given to Chiu Jing, and she believes it's the fact that her company and team shares the vision to address social issues through increasing awareness and bringing people together. That way, the world would be a better place for all. Kay Chow, 9 News.
Arizona State University and Norwegian University of Life Science investigated the aging pattern in bees and found that older foraging bees experience a change in brain chemistry when they revert to nest duties typically carried out by younger bees. Kay Chow has more.
Previous research has shown that bees stay in the nest and take care of the larvae remain mentally competent, while older bees that are in charge of foraging for the colony age very quickly in comparison. Groandam and colleagues at Arizona State University and the Norwegian University of Life Sciences began their quest to find out if there was plasticity in aging pattern of bees. The research involved removing younger nurse bees from the nest, and half of the older bees intuitively stayed home to take care of the young, and those that stayed back were significantly better at learning new things. Comparing the brains of the new caretakers with those continued foraging, the researchers found that increased level of the protein PRX6, which is known to protect against dementia in humans, as well as increased levels of a chaperone protein that protects other cellular proteins during times of stress. The result shows that social interventions, rather than drugs, may be effective at slowing age-related cognitive decline or dementia from neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's. Changing how you deal with your surroundings is something that can be done today to help our brains stay younger. Kay Chow, 9 News.
Now we have our TV9 host from Asia Focus, Julie Nixon, to talk about the Maori water rights issue.
The question of who owns water has the potential to polarise New Zealanders from North Cape to Bluff. Maori are saying that there are particular streams, lakes, aquifers and springs that they have used and as a result have acquired a customary law interest in those things. The argument is that before the government sells Mighty River Power and other power companies, it needs to be tested whether Maori have any prior interests. And in particular, it needs to be tested whether Maori have any rights over water. This is the key point as the Waitangi Tribunal meets this week. The tribunal is hearing from a number of electricity experts and economists, as well as Maori, about whether the sale of shares in power companies breaches the Treaty of Waitangi, and if so, what rights do Maori have? Prime Minister John Key has rightly pointed out that the government could choose to ignore the outcome of the tribunal's hearings because the rulings are not binding. The government is not even required to comment on the tribunal. However, the tribunal plays an important role in race relations in this country, and the Prime Minister is making a mistake by batting the issue into touch before the game is over. He needs to show that he is at least listening. And as for the issue of water ownership, this needs to be sorted out before the process to sell the hydro companies begins. If it's not, it will add risk to the future prospects of the power companies. Professional investors will look at who controls the water that runs through the turbines, so will mum and dad investors. It seems unlikely that the tribunal or any subsequent court hearing will find that Maori own the water. This would be unacceptable to the majority of Kiwis and therefore divisive. But we at least need to have a process that involves consultation. It's the only way we can have a win-win.
Thank you, Julian. Now moving on to our Asian news. Data shows as imports growth is affected by global economy, China's trade surplus widened in June, highlighting fears about both the domestic and global markets. The Customs Bureau said the trade surplus for China increased to $31.73 billion in June, up 42.9% compared with the same month last year. The main contributor was weak imports, growing by 6.3%, which was half the pace that analysts have been expecting. China, as a massive cheap goods exporter, was claimed by some in the US for keeping yuan undervalued, in a bid to give its good a competitive advantage. Chinese currency has been allowed to appreciate at a very gradual pace in recent years, but analysts say it's still undervalued. In order to stimulate consumption in domestic high-tech industries, China, the world's biggest producer of rare earth metals, could become an importer of vital industrial ingredients by as early as 2014. Due to decades of mining, China has experienced a severe environmental damage. China says it would prefer to be the biggest importer rather than the biggest exporter of rare earths. According to Reuters, China, producing over 90% of world supplies of rare earths, is now consuming 65% of outputs versus 25% a decade ago. Apple accused that Samsung's Galaxy Tab 10 infringed the design of its iPad. The case has been settled by UK High Courts, saying Samsung's Galaxy Tab was not as cool as iPad. As a result, Samsung won the case. Judge Colin Burrs disagrees, saying Apple's design were not being infringed because view would confuse the two, even though they appeared superficially similar. In a statement, Apple repeated its view that no coincidence that Samsung's latest products resembled the iPhone and iPad. Apple now has 21 days to appeal against the judgment. Death penalty for drug trafficking and murder in some cases is planned to be changed in Singapore. Some say this is a move to the right direction. Under the proposed changes, in murder cases, the mandatory death penalty will only apply when there is an intention to kill. For low-level drug couriers who cooperate with police, the courts will have discretion in sentencing. According to BBC, the legislation is expected to be introduced by the end of the year. The death row convicts will get an opportunity to be resentenced. Singapore maintains that its mandatory death penalty will continue to apply in most cases. A draft of the Japanese government's growth strategy showed that a $628 billion will be created to its green energy markets by 2020. The funds will be put on subsidies and deregulation to spur developments of low-emission cars and renewable energy. According to Reuters, the government will also cooperate with the Bank of Japan to ensure the country achieves stable price growth and exits deflation. Reports said that a long-term strategy for Japan to spur its potential growth is under the process of crafting. Now let's take a short break and we'll be back shortly.